Do you remember that time you did that stuff and the thing happened? Well, I don't because you never told me about it. And frankly, I'm a little disappointed. Today, we're talking about revealing your character's past or backstory to the reader. It is very difficult to have a well-rounded, realistic, and interesting character without that character having a well-fleshed-out backstory. Everything from how that character acts, how they dress, what their values are, their worldview, their pizza topping preferences, are all going to be heavily influenced by their past and by their upbringing. However, getting that information across to the reader can be a little bit tricky. Backstories are essentially exposition, and exposition is one of the hardest things to get across to the reader in an effective way. So let's talk about some of the ways that you can effectively reveal your character's backstory. Hopefully this video will be quite revealing. Not like that. Get your mind out of the gutter. First off, much like characterization in general, expositing the backstory of a character can be broken down into two broad methods: direct and indirect. Direct is, if I may be direct, when you directly direct elements of a character's backstory directly in the reader's direction. Directly. If you start a sentence with something like, "She grew up in a small town in Wales," or "He left home at 14 to pursue his dream of working for the Department of Transportation," then that's a direct revelation of the backstory. Usually this is done through narration, although I would argue if this is something that's revealed through dialogue, then that could also be considered direct revelation of the backstory. Problems with revealing backstory this way usually crop up when you try to do too much of it. Just like having an info dump of expository information about the setting is usually a bad idea, the same goes for big passages of character backstory information. These tend to be boring and encyclopedic. They distract from the action and dialogue in the scene, and they also pull the reader out of the story because instead of focusing on the events that are happening now, we're reading about a bunch of stuff that happened in the past. Now, all that being said, there are some cases where you could use this sort of passage to your advantage. We'll talk about those later on in the video. The advantage of directly telling the reader the character's backstory is that it usually takes fewer words, and since you're effectively just relaying facts to the reader, there's very little opportunity for the reader to misunderstand or not pick up on something. They might be bored, but they'll be informed, just like a viewer of this channel. The direct method is arguably telling, and as everyone on the internet likes to tell you, showing is usually better. It would be nice if these people would start showing you that instead of just telling you it, but this leads into the other way to reveal character backstory, the indirect method, and there's a number of different methods in order to do that. The first is fairly broad, but I'm going to label it as showing the effects of events in that character's backstory during events that are happening in the story. For example, if they were terrorized by a clown, they might be scared of clowns now. If they are reluctant to return to a certain city, then something traumatic might have happened to them there. If they have trouble trusting, it might mean that they were betrayed at some point. You might have two characters talk about an event that happened in the past without revealing all the details about it, but by showing the reactions to the discussion, you can imply a lot about what sort of thing happened. Even something like a character having a scar or walking with a limp can potentially reveal an element of their backstory. Everything that has happened to that character needs to bleed into what they are doing in the present. Sometimes this is subtle, sometimes it's a bit more overt. The tricky part with the indirect method is the reader doesn't necessarily know exactly what events led to that character's behavior, and there's always opportunity for them to misunderstand. What you can do with this method is use it to foreshadow revelations that are directly revealed later on. Introduce a strange quirk or behavior of the character, and you'll pique your reader's curiosity. Then later on, you can reveal the backstory element that led to that quirk in more detail, maybe through a direct method or potentially through an indirect method. The most effective, or I guess accurate, method is arguably the flashback. This is where you jump back in time for a scene, usually to reveal an important moment in the past. Flashbacks come with their own set of challenges, though. So many, in fact, that I made an entire video on that subject. And also, it could be argued that flashbacks are more of a direct method, although if you're showing what happened to the character in the past, then that's arguably indirect. Anyway, flashbacks give you an opportunity to get more information directly across to the reader about a backstory element, but allow you to do it in a fully immersive scene instead of just through the narrative, which is usually going to be more effective. Regardless of what method you're using to reveal your character's backstory, the most important thing when it comes to backstory is not to overdo it. The reader doesn't need to or often want to know every single thing about the past of a character. Focus only on what's relevant and what has an impact on the story. Momentous events that really shape the character are more interesting than the minutiae of their college years. Also, to link up with what we talked about last week, tie how you deliver backstory to the individual viewpoint character. For example, if you have someone who's sort of closed off and doesn't like to talk about their past, they might reveal a lot less than someone who is proud of their legacy or has a lot of accomplishments they like to think about. If you have like a really egotistical character, then their narrative might be filled with relivings of their past glories. This is a case where you could actually use a lot of direct revelation of the backstory and also the flaws with that direct revelation of the backstory in order to enhance the characterization of that character. Usually revealing backstory in this way is a little bit boring and annoying to read, but people like that tend to be a little bit boring and also annoying, so it's a good fit in that case. Speaking of boring and annoying, I hope this video wasn't either of those things. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the advice in it useful. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. I post new videos every Wednesday and occasionally on Friday. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.